Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shocker Family Connections. My name is Tia Hill. I'm Assistant Director in the Office of Student Involvement, and I'm here to talk to you about events and things that are going on campus, specifically in housing and residence life. Before we get started, I just want to prep you with saying that we will be taking questions in today's session. So if you are viewing this through YouTube Live, if you log in, you can submit your questions in the comment section. And if you're on Facebook, you can just drop that in the comment section as we go along. As I mentioned before, this is the Shocker Family Connection series, and it is taking place all week, Monday through Saturday, and it features daily topics from different areas of campus. And today we're meeting with Katie Austin from Housing and Residence Life, and she's going to talk to us about living and learning at Wichita State. So I'm going to pop her into this conversation, and she's going to begin talking to you about what's going on in housing. And again, you can enter your questions in the comment section at any time. Hi, Katie.
Hey there. Thanks, Tia.
You're welcome.
Excited to be here with you all. As Tia said, my name is Katie Austin. I serve as an assistant director in the Office of Housing and Residence Life. I've been with WSU Housing for about 8 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes over the last while. We've actually closed 3 old buildings, opened 3 new buildings. It's been very exciting to see all the changes come to campus and to have such wonderful facilities now for our students to live in. Our oldest building is Shocker Hall, which was built in 2014, so that's not too bad. And it's our second year of the suites. We also have the flats apartments on campus, so it's really nice to have a lot of different options for students, and it's great to see them all back this year. Last spring was a doozy, and it was just different, and so was move-in this year, but it's good to have students back on campus. I've been so impressed with all of your students and how well they're doing with the changes, adhering to our guidelines that we've put in place, whether it be about our guest policy or mask wearing, or just, taking responsibility for their actions in their health and safety in the community within our buildings. That's been great. So kudos to them for all the things they're doing as students here to make sure that we can continue this semester. We're just very happy to have students back in the buildings. So a few things that I'll be talking about tonight include kind of what's going on campus. Besides the pandemic, there's always other exciting things. So I can definitely talk about, our protocols, procedures, things that are going on with COVID. Some of you might be pretty familiar with that already. So I also want to talk about things like our living learning communities, the programming that's going on, what things your students can look forward to in the coming months, what things you need to be looking out for as far as contract dates, things with winter break and shutdown. So I'll try to cover a lot of that throughout the next while, and just really looking forward to the chance to interact with you guys. So if you do have questions, please put those in the chat. That makes it a lot more interesting when I can get a feel for what people are actually wondering about out there, not just what I think might be important. But the things that I'll start with, your student as a current resident has gotten a lot of information from us about COVID and about our protocols, but I want to make sure that you all feel comfortable and like you're in the loop on how things are being handled in housing and residence life. We have a great student health services on campus, and they are leading the charge. They are who's coordinating our effort, who's telling us what we need to do, and we are the logistics folks, just kind of falling in line. So they were the ones who ran all of that testing when students moved into the halls at move-in. Everyone got tested, every single resident, which was great because we were able to catch things on the front end, isolate folks who were COVID positive, quarantine folks who were at exposure, and really, nip things in the bud early. So that was great. Since then, we've been handling any cases that come up. Student health gets a hold of us if someone has tested positive over there, or someone has come up and said that they had an exposure or are close contact to someone who is COVID positive, and we initiate our isolation or quarantine procedure. Isolation if you're COVID positive, quarantine if you're an exposure or close contact. And the difference there is a little bit in the timing of how long they have to stay in isolation, as well as how student health handles things on their side. So we have plenty of spaces held offline for students to quarantine in place on campus. So they have the option of either going home or staying put in the halls. Each building has plenty of spaces. We haven't had an issue with running out of spaces for students that need to do quarantining or isolating. And we will work with them to provide meals. They basically let us know if they want breakfast, lunch, dinner. We get those delivered to them for each meal. We work closely with dining services on that. We manage, the process of getting them moved to their new room so that it's really contactless, and they have everything they need. They're getting checked in with regularly, and when they're safe and healthy and they're able to come out, then we manage getting them back into their room as well. So it's pretty seamless at this point. We've really got it down. So if you're a student or you have any questions about our health and safety procedures and protocols, we'd be happy to answer those. But we, again, really take our direction from Student Health Services. So if your child is feeling under the weather at any point this fall, which can happen for a myriad of reasons outside of COVID-19, encourage them to go over to Student Health Services. It's in the YMCA building, right next to the flats, very close to the suites and Shocker Hall. So we encourage them to, if you're feeling under the weather at all, just go get that checked out. And they'll determine whether you'll get a COVID test while you're in there. So that's really what's going on with our health and safety side of things. But in addition to that, we've got our usual things that we'd have going on any year. We have roommate agreements and suite mate agreements happening. So RAs are going by or working virtually with each suite in each of our buildings to get some of those expectations signed early on in the semester. We call it during the honeymoon phase when everybody's still friendly, to go ahead and lay down some of those expectations so that everybody knows whether we're having guests over, how comfortable people are with that. Are we having overnight guests? Are we having people late at night? Are we eating each other's food or sharing clothes? Like, what are our standards that we're going to live by in this room? And that's really helpful because come late September and October, we start to get to where those issues start to crop up a little more. People are getting comfortable, stop being polite, they start being real. So we have to be ready for that. And it's really handy. We put this all in Room Pact, which is a program that your student signs up for. And that's how they get messaging and things from some of housing staff. And they can pull that out. The RA can say, hey, let's see what we agreed upon early on. Where are we at? Are we wanting to change this expectation? It looks like you haven't followed these, things that we agreed to. So it's a great starting point for roommate mediations, and those will happen. And please encourage your child, if they're having concerns with roommates, to reach out to their RA to initiate some of those conversations. That's a growing point for students. It's really a personal development thing that they can have some of those conversations, learn how to confront someone in an assertive way and not an aggressive way or passive aggressive way. So that's really part of that growth of living with someone who's a little different than yourself and learning how to cope with that. So encourage them to take ownership for that and to work with our staff. We've got a lot of great resources to make that a pretty easy process for them. Shouldn't be too uncomfortable or anything like that. So that's going on. If your student happens to live in one of the living learning communities, we've got a ton going on with our LLCs. Those are all in Shocker Hall, of course, for our first year students. And the LLC coordinators have been busy at work planning virtual events, planning a few outdoor events. I know Honors was going to go to the zoo. The engineering LLC was doing some virtual industry tours, and they've been having study hours down on their floor. Fine Arts is always doing a lot of cool things. So check into those if your student signed up for an LLC, because they've got some extra support and programming happening around that particular area of interest that they signed up for. So in addition to that, there are regular programs going on. They're a lot more online and they're a lot more small groups. So each floor will have some community traditions where they meet once a month and kind of either they're doing baking or they're watching a movie or doing a game night or going on walks outside, something to create tradition floor. And then they're doing a lot more individualized outreach. So instead of having big floor meetings with everybody gathering, we're obviously trying to go a different direction and do more individualized meetings to create those connections still, but do it in a more safe and manageable way so that we're not getting large groups of people together and sharing all those germs. So those things are happening. There's also a ton of events happening on campus, and that's what housing, with all that we're doing COVID-19, we're really pushing a lot of the programming and taking students to things that are already happening on campus. I know there is going to be outdoor movie that student involvement is putting on soon. I know at Halloween that the Radigan Student Center, Grillin' Lanes down in the basement with the bowling alley is putting on some events. So those will be really cool. There's just a lot happening on campus. They're doing a virtual pumpkin run, but students can still go and actually run the pumpkin run route if they are on-campus students. So ask your student, what's going on, what they've heard about, because there is a lot happening still. You just might have to look a little bit harder than a typical year because it's not big groups of people that you could see gathered around the Radigan Student Center like in the past. They're happening here and there. There are a lot of outdoor things for that safety perspective of having better air ventilation, but there's still things going on. So we really encourage them to find that connection or talk to their RA if they're having trouble finding that. Those are the main things I was going to touch on. I guess if we're talking more about the application, housing applications for next year, if you can believe it, go live October 1st. So students would go into their MyWSU portal and they would fill out the housing application. At this point, they don't need to know even what building they want to go to or what kind of room they want or who they're rooming with. They're simply saying, yes, I'm going to live on campus next year, and kind of reserving their spot in line for room selection in April. So they've got a lot of time. We just recommend that they really complete it before December 1st. October 1st to December 1st is kind of the first early bird group, and they will get to go through selection first. So if the type of room your student has is important to them, we recommend by December 1st, they get that application in with the $75 non-refundable application fee and with the $200 prepayment. So be sure that you're keeping an eye on that deadline if that's important, what type of room your student gets next year. They obviously, if they're new students this year, have the opportunity to live in the flats next year and might have the chance to live in the suites. It always depends on how many first-year students we have. They get first preference for both the suites and Shocker Hall. The flats apartments, though, are wonderful, and if your student hasn't seen them, they can give our office a call, and we can always show them that space, make sure that students know kind of what their options are for the following year. So they're full apartments. They've got in-room laundry. They've got big kitchens with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. They're really nice. So we encourage them to check those out, be thinking about what they want to do next year. Let's see. I think, Tia, that's what I've got to start with. Have any questions come in?
Not at this time. I will have some questions to ask you. I wanted to show folks, so I'm going to pop you out of here real quick about the events that are on campus. So we do have, Wichita State hosts a calendar on their website. If you're not familiar with that, I wanted to take a time to show you. So this is wichita.edu. And if you scroll down on the page, there's a lot of information on here. So there's some cool graphics that they've put together. But if you see what's happening at Wichita State, you'll see latest WSU news and upcoming events. This upcoming events tab sends you to the university event calendar. So if your students are commenting about they're not sure what's really going on and what kind of events are happening, if they go to this calendar, they're going to see a list of those selections. And as Katie said, our office in student involvement, we do a lot of programs throughout the year. That is number one, what we're dedicated to is providing experiences and opportunities for students. So if your student is wondering what's going on, encourage them to visit this calendar. Some of them, you'll see community events that are sponsored by our continuing education. You might see events that are sponsored by student involvement or various other departments. Our Office of Diversity and Inclusion is sponsoring National Hispanic Heritage Month. They've got a lot of events going on. There's art exhibits in the Cadman Art Gallery. And then on this Thursday, Student Involvement is hosting Flicks on the Field, which is a movie series at Cessna Stadium. So it's outdoors, socially distanced. We're providing students with popcorn, free drinks, and a way to get out of their room and experience a different space and view a movie, which a lot of folks haven't been able to do for several months now. Going to the theater has not been something that's available, so we're trying to offer this throughout this semester. Something that we're additionally doing is my department is in charge of homecoming. Katie had mentioned the events such as Pumpkin Run, things that Shocker Sports Run Lane is doing. Homecoming at Wichita State will be a great opportunity for students to get out, interact, and feel a connection to campus. Students can form groups and they can compete against each other in both in-person and online activities that are socially distanced but also dedicated to enhancing Shocker pride. So your students will see more of that information in the upcoming weeks as October rolls around and they can better understand what some of those events are. In the meantime, I am going to pop Katie back into the feed and I'm going to start asking some questions. So it looks like we have a question, Katie, from Richard, who asks, how are LLC activities communicated? Is there a place on the WSU website to see LLC activities, or is it just directly to the student?
That's a great question. It is mostly directly to the student. A lot of the LLC floors will have like a group me group texting chain where they'll put that information out, or they might have set up a Facebook group. So a lot of that is directly. It's pretty organic because the RA, the resident assistant for the LLC, is the one coming up with a lot of those events. The coordinator is helping them. The coordinator is somebody within that college. So for engineering, the College of Engineering has a staff member dedicated to helping the living learning community. Same with fine arts, same with College of Business. So they're giving them ideas saying, hey, we're putting on the back to school bash or the back to business bash. Make sure you bring students to that. But really, the RA is coming up with a lot of those programs. So yes, if you are wondering kind of what events are available to your student, ask them because they're getting that communicated directly to them from their LLC RA. And I know a lot of them are really going to get going in the next couple weeks. They may have had a little bit of delay kind of getting things going as they were handling some of their other RA duties like roommate agreements and things. But now we're going to really jump into some more programming. So check that out for sure. Ask them how their LLC is communicating with them, and encourage them to, be asking those questions, checking in with the RA, because the RA is usually trying a lot of different ways to get that information out, but maybe posters aren't being seen or door knocking isn't working. So we're always trying to get the word out about events. And usually they're planned like a week or two ahead of time. And it's, again, smaller groups compared to some of those larger scale events. So if your student is feeling a little more uncomfortable with large scale or bigger events where there's more people, LLC events are nice because they should be quite a bit smaller.
All right, Katie. So I'm going to refer to my list as we're waiting for some other folks' questions to roll in. You did mention a little bit about the RA. Can you talk about the roles and duties of the resident assistant, and then if their student might be interested in applying for that position, what that would look like?
Sure thing, yes. So the RA is such a critical student staff member for housing and residence life. We rely on them so heavily because there's one placed on each floor and each wing of the building. And they are really that key resource for your student. They are the one who is going to be enforcing policy. They are the one who's going to be planning programs, mediating roommate conflicts, and just serving as a resource and support to your student. So it's a really important job. Sophomores, juniors, seniors, grad students can all be resident assistants. And we start searching for that next crop of RAs right around winter break. We're going to open the housing application or the RA application November 18th, and then they have until about February 15th to complete that. The actual interview days will be the first weekend in March. And we're, really looking for those people who are looking to be a leader, looking for a leadership role, but it's also a job and it's got great compensation. We pay free room, free meal plan, and a small stipend that goes along with working some of the information desk hours. So it's a great position. It's one of the most critical student leadership positions on campus, if you ask me, because you really have an opportunity to make an impact on new students and on their Shocker experience. It's a pretty competitive process. We do have a lot of people apply, but we really recommend that people try out if they have any interest at all, because even the process itself, we've heard, is very enjoyable and they really learn a lot about themselves through it. It's never too early to start honing those interview skills and practicing. And this is a pretty safe way to do that because we've got really supportive staff that are doing the interviewing, engaging with the students, asking about why they want to be an RA and what they liked about their housing experience. But we are looking for a diverse group of students, introverts, extroverts, people who have, multiple majors that maybe want to be an RA for one of the living learning communities if they had a great experience in their LLC, or upperclassmen if they want to work over at the flats. So generally we hire our staff and then we place them in which building they'll be in for that following year. But yeah, it's a great experience. Students who have been RAs, they talk about all the things they've learned, all the transferable skills that they've picked up on learning to have those difficult conversations, conflict mediation. It's just a really great job opportunity that provides people with a lot of skills to move forward and be successful in future positions. People talk about it being a real big resume booster, but again, we're really looking for students who are looking to make a difference in the lives of their fellow students and be that resource for incoming students. Student Affairs, their motto is connecting every student, and that's exactly what the RA is there to do, to make sure everyone feels like they, in whichever way they prefer, whether they're joining a student org, whether they're just getting to know their roommates and be best friends with them, whether they are just, feeling engaged by hanging out in the RSC. We just want folks to feel connected, feel a part of that experience, and a part of Wichita State. And the RA is, boots on the ground, the person doing that there in the halls, making sure that nobody's, left out of the loop or not sure, if they're feeling connected to the community. So I do encourage folks to consider applying for that. I would ask your student if they have interest, and encourage them to check it out. We'll have some informational meetings that'll be posted. I believe one in November before everybody leaves, and then some over the break, some virtual ones where you can ask a current RA about a day in the life and what is the commitment like, and is it fun or is it, terrible? All those questions. So we've got a great group of RAs right now that are going to be sharing that and then helping to select the next group as they come in. So definitely recommend that experience if your student is interested.
All right, Katie, we had a great question earlier today. Somebody asked, what kind of training is offered for the resident assistants? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. We talk about how critical this position is, and a piece of that is we want to make sure they're successful in that position. And so we spend a lot of time on training. They actually come back about 2 weeks before move-in to go through some pretty comprehensive training, including having offices like Counseling and Prevention Services come over and talk about mental health and suicide prevention. We take them through a lot of scenario training, and we call it behind closed doors, where they actually have actors that, we have our returning RAs act out some of these scenarios that are common that they might come across, so they can gain those skills and that practice, get that feedback in a safe environment, and feel confident going into this role. So a lot of training happens. Our first year RAs also go through 6 weeks of extra training, where once a week they meet for an additional training session, about 2 hours each week. We call that our squad. So squad meets for 6 weeks after they start the job, where they kind of talk about their experiences so far. What are some challenges they've had? Get feedback from some of our staff. So we really value professional development for this position. The RAs as a whole meet as a staff weekly, and then we meet as an entire staff, flat, suites, and Shocker Hall all together once a month to do continuing education, where we talk about different topics. We had someone come in from Office of Diversity and Inclusion and provide safe zone training. We had someone from UPD, our police department, come in and talk about how they interact with us during incidents. So really making sure that these students are feeling supported in this position and successful, because they do serve on duty where they are responding to incidents, when we want to make sure they're confident in that role, and they do such a great job. We do have full-time staff members who live in the building and supervise the RAs. And every night that an RA is on duty, there is also a professional staff member on duty and then an assistant director on duty. So lots of layers of support to make sure that your student always has someone they can go to, no matter the time of night or day. But yes, that's kind of what we do for the RAs. So it is a commitment. There's a lot of training that goes into it, but it's a very rewarding position.
All right, Katie. Richard had another question. I don't know if you know the details completely offhand, but he asked, do you have a percentage of students that stay in residence halls after their first year based on prior history? And just curious what percentage move off campus after a year? Are residence halls mainly freshmen or not?
That's a great question. Yes. So Shocker Hall in a normal year holds about 820 students, and those are all first year students. The suites holds about 220, and that has been a majority first year students. We've had maybe one floor of returners that we've had to put over there each year. And then the flats holds about 400 students. So about half of the students that live on campus each year end up living on for their second year. So half of them move off, maybe they're moving into a fraternity or sorority house, maybe they're getting an apartment with friends, and then about half stay on for an additional year, whether they're being an RA, and then they might be in any of the 3 buildings if they're our staff member, or they're living over in the flats apartments, or might be part of the overflow into the suites that occasionally happens. So yeah, it's a great question. Our first year student number, as it keeps rising, the amount of first year students who choose to live on campus, that has something to do with the amount of out-of-state students that we're bringing to campus as that increases, as well as students in the area who are just choosing to live on campus instead of live at home with their parent and commute. Speaks to, the experience that we're providing. We're very happy with those numbers. President Golden is doing a lot of exciting things for our campus, and the question always comes up of whether we'll get more on-campus housing, because we're pretty full right now, but these buildings are all fairly new, so we're going to continue to see where that takes us. There are a lot of great apartments in the area nearby that students can choose to live in their second, third, and fourth years of college. So that's not uncommon, but I'd say, about 50% move over to the flats and continue living on, mostly for that convenience factor. It sure is nice to not have to worry about parking, and the ability to have, again, another layer of support by still being an on-campus housing where we have a residence life department kind of managing that, where you have an RA, but also having that mix of support and privacy of your own apartment. So that's been something that we've seen students are really looking for.
All right, Katie. I'm sure folks have asked some of these questions before, but could you tell us what practices and measures are taking place in residence life and housing that directly relate to COVID-19?
Sure. So the biggest policies this year have to do with our guest policy, saying that each resident shouldn't have more than 2 guests in their space at any given time. And our mask policy, that if a student is outside of their private residence, they need to be wearing a mask, wearing that face covering. So those are the biggest policy pieces that are helping to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So that's been really big. Some of the other, procedures and things I talked about with our isolation and quarantine spaces that we keep offline. We've got contactless procedures in place for a lot of things to make sure we're limiting contact between residents when it comes to their interactions at the information desk. If it has anything to do with being quarantined in a space, we are placing, meals outside their door, knocking, stepping back. When we are going to be doing health and safety checks here towards the end of the month, which remind your students to come down to the info desk and get a cleaning kit if they don't have one, or check out a vacuum and get that all ready, because we will be doing health and safety checks to make sure students aren't living in their own filth or anything like that. So we want them to be, cleaning that space regularly, taking out their trash. So we do checks. But we're putting a lot of things in place, to make sure that not only our staff going in feel safe, they have the option of a face shield in addition to a mask. We've provided gloves, of course, asking the students in the space to either, step out into the hallway or step into maybe the common space. There's a little more room to maintain social distancing. Just being careful about how often we're entering students' rooms, and if it's necessary, with our own staff meetings and things, we're really thinking about, is it a want or a need to be in person? Our conduct process is taking place all virtually. So if students are written up, if they get, if they break policy and have an incident report filed, that's taking place virtually, just to cut down again on that face-to-face where we don't have to do that. So if students are outside of their space without a mask, we are now at the point where we're done warning students. We're in week 5 or week 6, I believe, of so they are now being getting an incident report written and then going through the conduct process. The first infraction of that is still a written warning that'll come through conduct, but just trying to make sure that students are doing their part to keep everyone safe in the building, and that we've been issuing warnings, and now we're at the point where they know those expectations and they've been clearly communicated, so we do need them to follow protocol and those things.
All right, Katie, I know we're about middle of the semester right now, and some folks are already anticipating what they'll do after November. Can you tell us a little bit about what intersession might look like, that period between November and February, and what students' options are for living in housing?
Absolutely. So students have the ability to live on campus throughout the intersession break of winter break. But it is different this year because the academic calendar changed and everything was going online after November 20th. We shortened our housing contract, reduced the cost by 10% before we even put charges on the account this summer, and made the contract just go to November 20th. So if students want to stay on campus over the intersession time, they do need to complete an intersession contract. There are actually 2 of them. One contract if they're wishing to stay from November 21st to December 29th, and one contract if they're wishing to stay from January 1st to January 31st, right before class. I believe it's actually January 29th. We give a few days in there before classes start. So those, you can either pick both of them, or you can pick one or the other, or you can pick none. If you pick none, then you leave and go home over break, and you don't return until January 29th. You don't have to take all your things. You can leave it in your room like any other winter break time. You can leave your, mini fridge and your decorations up and whatever clothes you don't want to take home, and just take what you need for those 8 weeks. But if you are wanting to stay, you'll pay for that time that you'll be staying. You'll sign the contract and pay, and then you'll have access to your room over that time. So folks who are working, who have jobs in the Wichita area and maybe want to stick around, might opt into that. It is all or none on each of those contracts. So it's not just that you want to stay 2 more days and that's it. You're either opting into that entire time frame or you're opting out of it, because we've got to have some, consistency among who's in and who's out of the building. That's for safety and security reasons, as well as health and safety, so we know who we've got in the buildings. So some students may want to go home for that first one where it really includes Christmas and come back for the January piece to start work. Some folks might go home for the whole time. That's completely up to you. The building will be staffed. We'll have on-duty staff over the break every single day, including Christmas. So we just will drop access for those who are not signing contracts, and they will not be able to get in the building during those intersession times if they haven't opted into that. And we will follow up with each student individually. We're going to keep a big spreadsheet so we know where everybody's going. We're going to be doing calling campaigns saying, hey, what are your plans? Have you filled out the contract yet? That contract will go live late October, and we'll be asking folks to have that filled out by November 15th or so. So we have a couple days in there to shore up our list and make sure everyone's accounted for and we know what they're doing. If they're wanting to stay, we don't want it to be a shock to anyone when their access is turned off on the 21st at noon. So think about that now. Ask your student what their plans are. If they've got employment on campus, it could be that their on-campus employer isn't going to be working in the office past November 20th either. They might be all virtual, so their job might be sort of on hold over the break, or it may be that they're in the Wichita community and they want to get a bunch of hours and stick around over that time. Dining services will be limited, but there will be at least something available, whether that's the ground house where they can get more grab-and-go items, or a limited menu at the dining hall. So they might want to think about stocking up a little bit on groceries over that time too, because it gets a little more limited when there's not as many students on campus. But that's how intersession will work. We will, again, push that out to their wichita.edu email. So they should be checking their student email in the near future for some of those dates and important information regarding winter break, because it'll be here before we know it.
Katie, for folks who have an agreement with Chartwell's or WSU Dining Services, if they have a meal plan, Will that extend over the intersession time period? Do you know?
Great question. So that will be added on as part of their intercession. So they would purchase, they would have their housing, and then if they wanted to purchase some dining dollars to use over that time, they can do that as well. So the dining dollars that they have now carry over from fall to spring. So those would still probably be available to use as well. And depending what hours the dining hall is open, their swipes might be too. It's actually a great question. I'll have to follow up. Be keeping an eye on our website as we really shore up some of those details in the following weeks. But yes, we'll make sure there's dining options available to students. Students who have a full meal plan also got bonus dollars this fall due to the change in contract. Be sure you're using your bonus dollars because those expire November 20th. So those you want to get used up first before they use their dining dollars. They should specifically go up to cashiers, either in Shocker Dining, Ground House, Starbucks, wherever they go, and say they're using bonus dollars when they swipe to use up that balance. So that's a reminder. Please make sure your students are using those.
And I know this is new this year, Katie, but those dining dollars, they can be used, dining or bonus dollars can be used at all the dining facilities in the Radigan Student Center as well as Shocker Hall and the Ground House. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Sally the robot takes them, the salad robot, and Shocker Grill and Lanes in the basement takes them as well.
Okay. Let's see. I'm looking over my questions. I don't have at this time any more questions on my list. Katie, is there anything else that you feel like you want to add for folks?
No, I appreciate the chance to kind of get to share some information with you all. Please feel free to call us if you have questions. Our office is open. We are in person in Shocker Hall, right behind the Shocker Hall information desk. Tia's put our phone number up there. Also encourage your student to come down to the desk if they have questions. We are available to talk with them and would be happy to answer any questions they might have.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode for Shocker Family Connections. We thank you all for popping in and asking questions of Katie and just tuning in and hearing what's going on in housing and residence life. As I mentioned before, this series does continue on through Saturday. Tomorrow we are going to be speaking with our friends from Office of Student Success as well as our Assistant Vice President for assessment and retention. And we're going to be talking about student success, specifically as it relates to how you as a parent or family member can support your student through their academic journey. We're going to talk about tutoring services, mentoring services, and all of those other things that are available to your Shocker that they may be familiar with, or they just need a refresher and a reminder that those are available. So tune in with us tomorrow. Those sessions are at noon and 6 p.m. available through YouTube Live as well as Facebook Live. And I want to thank you all for coming out, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.